Hi, welcome to SBR Sports Picks. I'm Peter Loshak. Today is Friday, July 29th, and we are talking right now with Ed Feng from thepowerrank.com. We're going to take a look at, we're going to get his take on the Washington Huskies, maybe the most interesting team to analyze from an analytics perspective in the Pac-12. Ed Feng, thanks for being back with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be on with you again.
All right, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about Washington, because Washington, of course, just in terms of like analyzing teams, breaking them down, and making predictions on what we're likely to see from them, is maybe the most interesting team in the Pac-12. Of course, they're extremely well coached, right? Chris Peterson knows how to build winners, knows how to get the most out of the pieces that he's given with, and really overachieves with his programs. Now, though, with Washington heading into 2016, the expectations are there. So if they overachieve their expectations where they are now, that's going to be very impressive. They're the second choice to win the Pac-12 ahead of USC, UCLA, Oregon, all of them. Second only to Stanford. They're 4-1 to win the Pac-12, and their season win total is 9, juiced to the over. It's -140. The over, the under is +110. And we know the deal with Washington, right? Just an awesome defense. Their defense has a great profile. They're great at preventing big plays. They're great at preventing, basically anything in a passing situation. And their offense is improving. They've got this quarterback, Browning, who was a freshman last year. A lot of promise. What do we expect from him this year? The big negative with Washington is their ability to get big plays out of their receivers. And, other than that, they're a very, very impressive team. Ed Feng from thepowerrank.com. What's your take on what we can expect from Washington 2016?
Yeah, I love your analysis. I do want to, you did mention that Coach Peterson gets a lot of credit, and I think he does deserve a lot of credit for the success he had at Boise State. And they have taken a little bit of a dip since he left there. But you also got to ask the question, well, how much of that was the Boise State program? This program had won before he got there. I know he was the offensive coordinator there. He came in, won that ridiculous Fiesta Bowl game over Oklahoma. But I do ask the question, well, maybe he just had Kellen Moore for those 4 amazing years when Boise State was that group of 5 or whatever we called them back then, team that was busting the BCS. He also had a lot of talent on both sides of the football. I think there's a lot of NFL guys that played on those Boise State teams that were really good. I mean, I don't want to knock the guy, but I'm just not sure that we can put him, in the categories of the Stoops and Sabins and things like that. I think he needs to get it done here at Washington this year. And the other thing that you look at this team is like, well, what big wins did they have? I mean, they beat who they were supposed to beat last year. The only quote unquote big win was that win over USC, and that was a program that was in turmoil because their coach was drinking too much. And I forget if that was before the transition or after the transition, but that program had issues despite all the talent it had with USC down there. And when I do my calculations, when I do my preseason calculations, the thing that matters the most is what they did last year. And how I measure that is I take margin of victory in games and I adjust for strength of schedule with my algorithm. And, my algorithm isn't particularly impressed with that Washington team, but they were not in the top 25. And that is kind of the big thing leading into, the Huskies being 26th in my preseason rankings. They are behind both Stanford and Oregon in the North. And I think we're really overhyping these guys. I was actually a little shocked to say that the books are shading the over on 9, which makes me like the under a little bit more. The one thing I do like the under. I'm going to call it a lean just because I think a lot of these preseason polls are going to come in with Washington in the teens. I don't know if they're going to break the top 10 in either of them, but the preseason AP and coaches poll are actually pretty good predictors of success. And it could be one of these things where, my 26 is a little bit low. I still don't see this team as good as Oregon in the long run at the end of the season. And that's why I like the under.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely strike me as the kind of team that really excels against mid-range teams and lower, where sort of like coaching and the program and the system plays a bigger role than when they go against elite teams where talent sort of matters more and takes over.
Right.
What's your take on, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, I'm sure this is something you see all the time. You have a freshman quarterback, Jake Browning, a guy who did well in his freshman year and has a lot of potential, and people are saying, oh, well, between freshman year and sophomore year, he's going to make a big improvement. We can expect a big improvement. How does that factor into your analysis of Washington when you have a quarterback in that situation? What kind of performance do you expect to get from Browning in his sophomore year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of these subjective adjustments. I mean, I do account that he's a starter, but I do that in a pretty coarse way in the sense that I don't distinguish him from any other returning starter at any other position. And clearly that's a flaw in my model. Quarterback's the most important position, and you have a right to be excited about Browning. There are questions about who he's going to throw to. He is getting a guy named John Ross, the third back, who's supposed to be a speed burner that was injured last year. The offense was not good last year. I understand they were worse at the beginning of the season than they were later in the season. But it wasn't good, and I think you need to show it on the field before we can really be excited about this as a potentially Pac-12 winning team. And you also mentioned another thing, recruiting. I do some recruiting rankings every year, so I essentially take a weighted average over the last 4 years of your recruiting rankings to see where a team should stand. And Washington was 33rd, and this is after the 2016 recruiting class. They were actually behind Cal. So it's not like they're pulling in the 5-stars that can potentially make a jump, from a team that's middling in the 30s to something that can be a top 10 and a real playoff contender.
Right. All right. So do you expect them then to be maybe overvalued on their spreads coming up this year? Because even though a lot of the advanced stats guys have their varying opinions on Washington, it still feels to me like when they go up against USC and UCLA and maybe even Oregon, definitely Stanford, the public's going to come in against them. The public still doesn't think of Washington as a team that they want to bet on when they're a favorite or not getting a competitive line against those elite teams, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think there will be some value. And the thing is, we're not going to know anything about this team for 3 games. They start out the season with Rutgers, Portland State, and Idaho. I mean, that's a murderer's row of out-of-conference opponents right there. And so I think their first test comes when Stanford comes and visits. I don't actually remember which week of the season that is. So it's definitely something where we could see a lot of value, maybe persisting into the middle part of the season, especially if they get a win against Stanford at home on that Friday night. You could see some value persisting towards the middle of the season.
All right, so I guess to sum up, you think they're overvalued on their futures odds. You would lean towards the under 9 at about plus 120 on their season win total. But as far as spreads are concerned, you're still open to them maybe having some betting value during the season?
Yeah, I'm never one for kind of looking at those cupcake games and betting spreads just because they're so huge.
Right.
So when we get a little bit later in the season, when those spreads come down within 10, we'll wait to see what happens. I didn't get a chance to look at some of the look-ahead lines to see where they were, but that might be an interesting place to look at to see if you potentially are getting value.
Okay, Ed Feng from the Power Rank. Thanks so much, as always.
Always on the go? Bet365 has one of the top mobile platforms in today's market. Sign up today and don't let your busy life keep you out of the game.